Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today we have an extra super duper special guest, and her name is Riley Neugebauer. Welcome, Riley.
Hey there, Sean. Thanks for having me.
So you're kind of famous because you're an influencer and you're an installer, and I see you on things like Instagram and LinkedIn, and you're up on a roof talking and things like that. You're also a super duper NABCEP PV installation professional. That's PVIP certified person. And you have this organization that you started with stickers and everything called Solar for Women.
Yep,
So that's pretty cool. I have one of your stickers.
I know. I still have that picture of you holding my sticker up from that conference we were at together.
Oh, great. That was the ASES conference in New Mexico, I think.
Albuquerque, yeah.
Yeah, Albuquerque, New Mexico. That was a lot of fun. I love those ASES conferences. And you are right now in Boulder, and they do every other ASES conference in Boulder. So I'm sure I'll probably see you there coming up at the next Boulder ASES conference. Do you know what month that is? I know it's coming up.
Well, they had their DC one, right? Just happened in March. So probably next August, I would think, of 2025. That's my guess.
And you are right. That is August 4 to 6 in Boulder. So everybody should be there. They do it at the University of Colorado. It's totally beautiful up there, and there's all kinds of mountains around, and it's the coolest looking campus ever. So that'll be a lot of fun. And so let's kind of just talk about, like, how did you get into solar?
Yeah, so I went to undergrad at Allegheny College in Western Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. And I did an environmental studies bachelor's degree. And so I got a little bit of exposure to renewables through that program at the time, enough to sort of ignite an interest, I would say.
Mhm.
And so after I finished that degree, I ended up working for a couple of years for nonprofits doing community organizing, a lot of it with college students in Maine and Massachusetts to get out the vote and also to build renewable energy campaigns on their campuses. So I was doing, tangentially working on solar, I guess, in that capacity. And then I became the first sustainability coordinator at American University in DC. And I was there for a couple of years and ultimately decided I really wanted to do something a little bit more hands-on. And so I did my research and looked up programs and decided to go move back to Durango, where I had been for a summer internship in college, and commute across the border to northern New Mexico to a school called San Juan College to do a one-year PV solar design and installation certificate, with this idea that I was going to start an all-women solar company. And I had all these grand plans, of course, but I did that program back in 2007, 2008, somewhere around there, and pretty quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to start a company right out of the program, but it was a good amount of exposure to solar and design and install stuff. So that was kind of the first, dive into the industry in terms of installation and technical stuff.
You know what? I remember something that was probably, I don't know, like 2008, that time frame. And around Oakland, I was working in Oakland at Fidelity Roof Company with Stuart Wentworth, who developed Quick Mount. And there was some company or like some installers, and it was like an all-woman company. And I think they had like pink shirts or something like that. I don't remember. I haven't
Oh.
heard about it since then. But have you heard about anything about that? I'm going to try to find out about
I
that.
really haven't ever seen any all women's, almost any sort of trade company other than a little bit of roofing here and there and stuff online. But yeah, I would love to see more of it.
Yeah, so if anybody out there knows anything about that all-woman crew or any all-woman crew, let us know. We want to know about that. And so you want to start an all-woman solar company, I guess, someday.
Well, I did back then. I think now it's transitioned into a little bit more with the Solar for Women work,
Hmm.
probably leaning more towards workforce development, training, and just sort of network building. And so the network building's already happening. I already have a group on Facebook that has 150 people in it that are all women or non-binary folks that are doing solar in some sort of technical capacity. So it's supposed to be for installers, but it's sometimes people who are women who are running a solar company or who were installers for a long time and now are doing something else like design or something along those lines, but it's really supposed to be for sort of women in the solar trades. So that's mostly who's in there, and it's pretty great. So it's about that partly, or that's some of my big interest, is just building community for people who are kind of a much smaller group in the larger group of
Mm.
people doing solar install work. And then hopefully at some point be able to do some trainings that are more specific to women as well, or help others who are doing some of that work, which I've gotten to do recently, actually, with remote energy up at Red Cloud Renewable. They invited me to come co-teach for a week of their 5-week program focused on Native American women
Awesome.
doing solar installs. So some of those
Mhm.
things are happening. It's just not through Solar for Women, but I'm getting some opportunities that are really exciting.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I never can figure out why like the solar industry doesn't have like a 50-50 ratio. It seems kind of weird, especially since women are smarter.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to argue with you there, but I think I know some reasons, partly just that often women are the primary caretakers of children, and there's a lot of things about working in the trades that are not very flexible in terms of schedule, and I think that can be very challenging for a lot of women in their other needs at home. And then I think it's just really intimidating. Getting into the trades is really intimidating for a ton of people who aren't, previously exposed to it in some way or didn't grow up using tools. And often women fall into that category, whereas often boys are a little bit more socialized to be around tools and building things and that kind of mentality. And so that's not always true, of course, but it's just more so. So they're a little bit more used to the idea of it. And so for women, I think it's just a tough sell sometimes. And then lastly, I would say there's often just, it's not the job for everyone, regardless of your gender, I would say, because of what's required in terms of being outside and all of the elements and being up high and using ladders and doing dangerous things. I mean, that just isn't something that appeals to anyone, or not to anyone, but doesn't appeal to just anyone, I should say.
Yeah, maybe it's just some kind of like old cultural stigma that you're getting rid of, I think. And so, how long ago did you start Solar for Women?
I think it's been probably at least 3 years ago now, because I started it when I was living in Durango still, before I moved to Boulder to work for Namaste Solar. And I did it at the time because I was pretty frustrated with how things were going with my own solar career and some of the experiences I was having. And I kind of decided, I'm tired of feeling like I'm isolated and there's nobody to talk to about this or who I can relate to. And so I thought, well, I have the skills to organize and do network building. It's something I've done in the nonprofit world in the past. And so I put it to good use in doing something pretty simple in terms of the Facebook group. And then over the years, just been, you know, adding and inviting people as I find out about them. Or now some people just know that the group exists, so they'll send people my way because they want to connect them. And it's built itself organically a little bit, which has been nice. But it really has served the purpose of being a casual place for people to share resources or talk about their successes or even ask questions about products that they wonder if other people know something about. And it's very supportive. And that's what I wanted, because I don't know if you've ever been on that solar installers group on Facebook that's just general, that's mostly guys. And I think it has like thousands of members. And a lot of it is people just tearing each other down and telling each other why they did that thing wrong and, oh, your picture and this and that and your conduit this. And it's just kind of mean. And so I like having a group where it's the opposite,
Mhm.
where people are really supportive of each other.
Like not a bunch of rude, immature people with off-color jokes and things like that, I guess.
Yeah, tends to be a little more community and oriented and collaborative, I would say.
Well, there's probably like a bunch of men that would want to be in a nicer group too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. They will have to form their own group, however.
Great. And you also mentioned too that you are a licensed residential electrician in Colorado. So,
Yeah, a big milestone for me this year was getting enough hours to be able to take my what's called the residential wireman's test in Colorado so that I could get that license. And it's kind of the first step of electrical licensure in the state. A lot of states do not have this kind of interim tier before you get to your journey person's license, but Colorado does have it, which is nice. So you can do 4,000 hours of on the job training and then qualified to be able to take the test.
So you did 4,000 hours of solar installations and then you went and took a test? That's all it took?
you have to be an apprentice with a company. So because I had some hours with a company in Durango, and then when I came to Namaste,
Mhm.
every solar apprentice at Namaste sort of immediately gets signed up with the state as an apprentice under the electrician sort of pathway as
Mhm.
well. And then you get to count your hours. So after about a year and a half here, in addition to the other hours I already had, I was able to qualify to take the test.
So Namaste, I know that's supposed to be a really cool company. And it's also a word in like India, something like that.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what it means? I know it's like a greeting or something, like you go Namaste or something. Yeah.
Right. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I'll have to look it up, but it sounds like a super cool company that takes good care of their people, letting you get more skills and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and as you mentioned too, like every state has its own rules. I had somebody on the phone with me yesterday and he's going like, okay, I need to get everybody NABCEP certified in a week because they're all going to be installing and I just sold all this stuff. And I was like, well, you need to go through whatever state it is that, get your state license and that can take years. And he was like, what? I thought I could just get the NABCEP and you're going to get it for us. And so that's not the way it is. And I have to go and explain like there's a difference between the state requirements and getting NABCEP certified and all that kind of stuff. It oftentimes confuses people. So
Yeah. I guess if you're a policy wonk in your state, you might know the details. Currently in Colorado, you can be NABCEP certified and utilize that as your sort of ability to install solar in the state, but a lot of people don't like that because they want the electrical folks to have dibs on
sure.
that stuff. And so there's
Yeah.
a little bit of a fight there, but we'll see what happens with policy in the next couple of years. But I think right now NABCEP does allow that,
Mhm.
but that may change.
Okay. Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's people fighting over jobs and then like trying to get more pay because if there's like, say, less people that can install solar, then they can charge more. And then there's, competition between different fields. Like, can only electricians install piles for a like utility scale solar system, stuff
Right.
like that? Or can pile
Racking.
drivers do it?
Yeah. Same with the racking installs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there's all that kind of drama out there, and it'll all get worked out. And it's just part of being an American dealing with all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about your social media because I've seen you in a lot of places, and you mentioned Facebook, and I don't have time to go on all these different platforms. I've actually had my staff recently redo my Facebook profile. I haven't done it since I think about 2011. And so now that's getting back up there, but it's my staff of people that are putting things there and I'm making some videos and then they're editing them and putting them out there and stuff like that. So I think I've seen you on like what, YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn?
I primarily am on, yeah, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And then I barely have anything on YouTube because it
Mm.
just takes a little bit more effort that I haven't put in yet.
Uh-huh. Okay. So yeah, it's hard to keep track of all those things. And there's so many of them too. I don't know, a few months ago or something, I had Derek the Solar Boy on and
Yeah.
he's got a purple beard and he knows a lot about solar and O&M and stuff like that. I think we might even mentioned your name when we were talking.
He's awesome.
And I've,
I learn a lot from watching his
uh-huh.
videos.
Yeah, and it's like such a culture with like some of this stuff, and he's talking about different words that I don't even know what they mean, like doxing, and somebody like it sounds like they copyrighted his stuff, and then he didn't have access to the stuff that he made because somebody else copyrighted it, and like there was some kind of battle going on. It sounded really, really interesting.
If you're that smart and you're giving really detailed information, I guess you have to be careful.
Yeah.
He's getting into a lot of really technical stuff and he has like a huge
Mhm.
following, so I think it's a different game than the one I'm
Uh-huh.
playing.
Yeah, and there's also like taking sides on things. Like I try to be neutral. I think that that's my job as an educator to be
Hmm.
neutral on all this stuff. And so some of the things like what type of rapid shutdown? Is it module level or is it a lot of these new UL 3741 systems? And he's really hardcore for UL 371. In fact, he bought UL3741.com and he doesn't like the microelectronics and all that kind of stuff. And there's lots of reasons to like them and lots of reasons to not like them. So I try to just kind of remain neutral. And then there's also controversy too among like, how do you flash something? And so at first people were just like putting a little bit of caulking under an L foot. That was the way, the 20-year ago and earlier way. And then they came up with like, people started flashing, especially when my friend Stuart came up with quick mount, and then everybody kind of copied that too. And then lately they've been using butyl. There's a lot of these like butyl systems where it's sort of like this black sticky stuff, and you pull it off the back. It's sort of like pulling off of a sticker. You stick it down and you put your bolt in there. And so there's some differences of opinion there. And I'm just trying to stay neutral and give the benefits and the drawbacks to each side, even though personally, of course, I have an opinion that's secret. What did you do today? Were you doing any of those types of systems?
Actually, today we wrapped up one job that was a Tesla Powerwall 3 job that was on a shingle roof. And there we do primarily grid tied now with battery backup, sometimes on asphalt comp shingle roofs. And for those, we're typically using Iron Ridge hugs, they're called, which is their new kind of butyl based flashless. I think flashless is not what they call it, but that's what I would call it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like I was talking to, I have Johan, do you know Johan Alfson? He works for K2, and we did a podcast also. And so he was talking about that, and they call it flashing still. Like they still call it flashing.
Micro flashing or something, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And I was also talking to my friend from Iron Ridge, Spencer Wright, who I'm going to ask to be on the podcast too. And he was, he's going around training people on this stuff all the time. And I've got some friends too that work at Quick Screws, and they've been doing some kind of, that type of system too. I'm not sure if it's butyl, but it's another, micro flashing or whatever you call it.
Yeah, I mean, we were mostly doing the flash feet from Iron Ridge in the past. And I will say that these micro flashings, or whatever the correct terminology is, are far easier to install. I mean, it does save companies a lot of time and labor. And I think it's pretty important for our joints also. Like sitting there with a pry bar all day trying to pry shingles on roofs that are really tough to pry and stuff can be really tough on people's bodies. So I think there's multiple benefits to possibly moving away from that. But I guess we're not going to know for a few years what if any, the consequences are in terms of like, is it causing more leaks? Is it the same? Is it, what's the reality of that? It's probably going to be hard to know right away.
Yeah, there's benefits and drawbacks to everything. So of course, like with the regular type of flashing, when you're putting a piece of metal up there, it's overlapping. And so that's pretty good. But then when you're up there with the pry bar, maybe you're damaging the roof with the pry bar. Yeah. And like you said, only time will tell.
Exactly.
And so that's oftentimes too what happens at a company. They just like, you do the same thing. Like you're probably not switching off job to job going like, let's use a different rack. You get really good at one thing. You do it the best. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to switch it up in terms of shingle versus something else. We rarely do tile roofs. I think I've done one concrete tile roof that had a special kind of flashing, and then I've done a lot of Iron Ridge on shingles. And then our second job that we went to today when we finished the other one was metal. So we were using S5 clamps there. And then we've also used some interesting.
Yeah, I think I saw you on a video with the S5 clamps recently. Yeah.
Yeah. But we've done, I don't know if you've heard of these DaVinci shingles, but that was a strange product I had never heard of.
DaVinci. Oh.
They're like plastic. It's like this thick plastic roofing that looks kind of like slate tile or something. So it looks pretty nice, and it's super durable, but kind of weird to work on in terms of trying to find the right solar flashing and stuff. I think we were using a quick mount product or something on that. But yeah, there's sort of a variety out there depending on the roof for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So you also said that you just did a Powerwall 3, and I guess you've probably done lots of Powerwall 2s and things like that. Do you have a favorite with the Powerwall 2 versus 3?
I actually never did a Powerwall 2 because Namaste actually, they weren't sort of totally sold on batteries for a while there because the way the incentives were working from the utilities and et cetera, et cetera. And so we were sticking to Enphase pretty much entirely for a while there while I started. And then it's just in the last couple months that we've transitioned into using the Powerwall 3s, partly because Excel, which is a big utility up here in the Front Range, has like a battery program, and it's just making the financial piece make a bit more sense, I think, for customers. So yeah, it's pretty new to me, so I don't have a lot of comparison. But in terms of what I've heard from other people who've been at the company long enough when they were doing some of the old Powerwalls, everyone says these are just easier to install, and the commissioning process is a lot better now. And
Yeah, so with the Powerwall 3, they have an inverter and a battery and an input for PV. And so it's like you don't have to go install PV with a different inverter or anything like that. And
yeah,
so some people would call that a hybrid inverter that has the battery inside of it.
that sounds right. Yeah. You can do AC coupling or DC coupling with these PW3s, but we've pretty much just been doing, yeah, like the solar
Okay.
direct to the
So
battery.
like if you didn't plug solar into it, then it would be sort of like a Powerwall 2.
Yeah.
If you could do AC coupling with it. And so when you put your DC circuits into that, I guess you're using the MCIs, the mid circuit interrupters.
Hmm.
And how does that go? Like, are you putting one every so many modules?
Every 3 mods, I think, is what we are
Mhm.
doing, or how the designers are doing it. Hmm.
And do you have to have one at the end, or could I, like, say you had 9 modules, can you go three and then put one and then three and another one? Is that like, so with 9 modules, you would need two of them?
I think you have to put one at one end or the other.
Oh, at one end or the
So it'd
other, so
probably have
you
to be
could.
three.
Okay, yep. So you could shut it off. So you need three of them. So it'd be just pretty much a ratio of 3 to 1. So they call them a mid-circuit interrupter, and it's sort of like an inline DC disconnect, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, is that that's how they're meeting their rapid shutdown requirements and stuff.
Yeah, and so I know some people that came up with the rapid shutdown, and a firefighter, his name's Matt Pace. And one time he was telling me how that's kind of what UL 3741 was intended for, was to have being able to go up to three and then shut it off every 3 modules. So it would be like 3 module level shutdown, and that they tested a wet firefighter, something like that, the resistance of a wet firefighter. And I was wondering who volunteered for that job. It wasn't you, I guess.
Wasn't me.
Put on all the firefighter gear and stuff like that. And so now some of the controversy is now they have these systems that can go up to 600-volt residential, 1000-volt non-residential buildings, and then you don't need rapid shutdown if it's a ground mount. So I thought all that's kind of, pretty interesting stuff, how that
Yeah.
works. Yep.
I mean, it does feel, in terms of being used to using Solar Edge previously and then Enphase and now this, it does feel more scary a little bit as an installer in terms of the safety side of it. But that's just partly like getting so used to micro inverters and or optimizers compared to string inverters. Like hardly most of the people who've started in the solar industry in the last couple of years haven't really dealt with string inverters. And now these battery products are coming back around like Tesla, where you're going back to that sort of model again, where you have to do all the home runs. And I think it's kind of a learning curve and a safety thing that companies have to be thinking about more too.
Yeah, and I was just looking up some things today, and I noticed that they do have rapid shutdown that stays up at 600 volts after shutdown for residential for some places. So this is called the air flush mount, and that goes up to 600 volts after shutdown. It's a UL 3741 thing, and it says outside the array boundary, 30 volts in 30 seconds. That's for everything. But inside the array boundary, 600 volts residential, 1000 volts commercial. This is made for like a sloped asphalt type of roof. And
I mean, I suppose if you had a huge roof, you could get to 600 volts on one string, but it just seems like, at least on the roofs we're doing, it's hard to even make a string that big, probably.
oh, yeah, because the PV modules are getting bigger. How big and heavy are the modules that you're using right now?
This is actually a complaint I have about the industry, which is I don't think that this is being taken into consideration from the perspective of the manufacturers. Is what about all the people who are doing this work physically?
Mm.
But on the residential side, what we're dealing with is probably somewhere in the like 43 to 47 pounds per mod. And the biggest ones we have, I think, are like 40 or 41 inches or something like that by about 75 inches. So, I
Mhm.
mean, these are 410 watts. They're big, and I feel like they just
Yeah.
keep getting bigger. And at some point, it's like they don't fit on roofs very well. And I don't really get why we continue to need to push that personally, because it just feels excessive from the standpoint of the people doing the work, even if you're in the best scenario, right, you're like team lifting everything, or you've got a mod lift for everything. But the reality is, like, you're probably going to be handling mods by yourself at least some of the time if you're on a residential crew and you're on like sloped roofs. And I just get really frustrated by it. And I can do it, but it's like,
Mhm.
obviously for me, it's going to be harder than some guy who's 200 pounds. So I just think if we want the industry to be diverse and we want to attract other types of people to install work in the trades, we need to be thinking about stuff like that. And I think it's frustrating that that's
Yeah.
not even a question that I feel like anyone's even asking, really.
Well, you have to keep the back surgeons and the chiropractors in business, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like guys don't want to talk about it because they don't want to act like they can't do it or whatever. But I'm like, this isn't good for anyone. It's not just
Mm.
me that thinks it's
Yeah,
hard.
sure. Yep. And then it shortens the span of time and the age somebody could be up on a roof and all that kind of stuff. And, we were always having commercial modules and residential modules. And the residential modules, because they were smaller and you could fit them in more spaces on a roof. So now there's a lot of places where you can't fit stuff because the modules are getting so big that maybe they should make an option where you can have smaller ones that
Yeah.
you can fit in all these places. Sort of like probably we're getting to that point where if we go back 10 years, the ones that used to be commercial modules are the same size as what today are residential modules. It might
Right.
even be more than that.
Yeah, I don't
So,
think they're that different, honestly. But I feel like the 350s were kind of that range when mods were like
mm,
275, the
mm,
350 watts were that felt like the right size in terms
mm.
of residential installation. But I'm not talking wattage, I'm talking just like physically the
Yeah.
ability
Mhm.
to move them around was a lot easier for basically everyone. And so I understand some of the capitalism behind this, of course, but I also feel like, shouldn't we be thinking about this more broadly and find a way to do it that works for designers and everybody too? So I just hope at some point we stop the craziness with it has to get bigger every year, every 2 years or whatever.
Yeah, when I first saw these modules getting bigger and they'd be like 500-watt module and then you see all these people that don't really understand it and they think that, oh, they're getting more efficient. They're like they used to be 30 watts and now they're like 700. They're just getting more efficient. It's like, no, they're getting bigger, they're getting huge. They're getting to have these big cells. And so, yeah, they take up more space.
Yeah. I would like to get in a room with manufacturers to have this conversation. And I thought about it because NREL's in Golden here in Colorado. It's not that far away. And they have some kind of annual gathering where people talk about sort of the solar technology itself and the panels and the cells. And I remember writing to one of them last year when I saw something about this event to be like, what if I came and talked about how we really need to stop making these modules so freaking big? And the guy was like, "You could do a poster or something," and I'm like, "I know, I have to like take off work," and I don't know, it just like didn't really make sense. But
You know what? You're a community organizer. And I was going to tell you too that I kind of started off as a community organizer for solar too. My friend
I
wrote
am
a law called community choice aggregation, and
nice.
I was holding up protest signs. That was like the first thing I did in the solar industry is we were out in San Francisco making signs and holding them up and all that kind of stuff. So let's go out there and the next time they're doing something, we'll get out in front of NREL and we'll start picketing.
That's
We'll
right.
tell all those like scientists that they're being insensitive to
Uh-huh.
the health and well-being of rooftop residential solar installers. It's like I can understand bigger ones when it's on the ground or something like that, but when you're moving around a roof and you're like, you got to be really agile like a mountain goat up there, and it's harder to get two people in one spot and you're walking over rails and all that kind of stuff. It's like it's somebody's going to die, you know?
It's a problem. It really is
Yeah.
a problem. Not only that, you're gonna lose more mods off the roof because stuff happens and they slide or whatever. Because hopefully, if something happens, you let go rather than go with it. But I do think it's a recipe for a problem in the future if it hasn't already happened. But I think more so, just come on, like, is there a cap? Are we gonna say like, well, rooftop mods really should be under 50 pounds? It's like 50 pounds is too heavy. They need to be less than that. So I'm just curious if that is in anyone's like design parameters, or if the design parameter is only like make it bigger, make it have more watts, because then we sell more and that's all that we care about. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm also thinking too, like what would be another benefit of a large residential module is when you have module level shutdown, then you have less microinverters, something like
Yeah.
that. So maybe that was an incentive to, for the residential industry to go larger. So
Mhm.
you need less electronics, something like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, one thing I've seen a manufacturer send out that came to Namaste at least, and I'm sure other companies, was one that was asking more about, we're thinking about these sizes of mods. Like, should it be wider? Should it be longer? There's nothing about
mhm,
like,
mhm,
smaller. It was all like, which way should it get bigger? Because if it gets bigger this way, will it not fit in your van anymore? Because that's a problem. I'm just like, it's funny that they think about that, but they don't think about like, will this
uh,
injure people?
uh-huh. I'm thinking like if they're going to get bigger, they should be long and narrow because then less rail, maybe.
Oh yeah. But at some point, it's like roofs are only so tall a lot of the time, so then you can't fit two rows. So now you fit one big row, but then you have like, it's just like an awkward. Then you do more landscape. I don't know, but
Mhm. We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. So one time I had a vision that's kind of the opposite of which way we're going, that maybe someday, 100 years in the future, what will happen is they build a house and then some kind of giant solar thing gets manufactured and it's a full-on roof and it
hmm
gets helicoptered in and it'll last for like hundreds of years and make electricity. And so you don't have to worry about waterproofing. I guess the only problem is then I was like, well, then what happens if somebody hits it with a golf ball? Like, I guess they would have to have like super strong glass, or maybe there'd be some kind of like windshield repair kit type of thing for that. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I know
Uh,
it is an interesting idea. It doesn't
uh,
seem to me that the solar tile stuff is really that great of a product at this point from what
mm.
I've heard. I haven't installed it, but I like the concept of, yeah, can we just make a whole surface produce electricity without having to go through all these other steps? It'd be more simple for sure.
Yeah, and so one of the drawbacks of the solar tiles is they're smaller, so they have to make all these connections. So what if it was just one giant
Yeah.
roof?
Does it have to stay under 600 volts per roof plane?
Oh, well, I mean, it's just one roof. So I don't know, like 100 years from now, they'll probably have all different rules and stuff like that. I'll have to think about that. But 600 volt, how would a big giant solar module be? I mean, I guess you could wire that thing inside of that roof however you wanted, like
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I imagine too, like 100 years from now, it'll be like electronics will be totally different and things will be all invented by like quantum AI, just like my computer. And and they'll be figuring all that stuff out and some big machine will make it and there won't be any human input. And then some kind of swarm of drones will come up and pick it up and
Yeah.
bring it across town or however far and just kind of just set it down on their roof that was made by like some kind of giant printer,
I was
you
gonna
know.
say that's already starting to happen
Uh,
with the printing of homes, so I could
yeah.
see that taking off. I mean, I feel like the question I continue to have is there always this sort of growth mindset, and maybe I'm just old-fashioned or something, but I still feel like we need to get better connected in the trades overall in the building industry to figure out, why do we still not take advantage of passive solar? Why do we still not, integrate more sustainable building materials into more homes in the Southwest, especially in places where it just makes so much sense? And so I'm a little frustrated by that because it seems like the sizes of these systems is just continually getting bigger and bigger, especially with EVs now. And it just seems like the conversation around efficiency often gets sort of sidelined as a totally separate conversation from solar, because solar people make money off solar. And so if you're putting a bigger solar system on, you're making more money. I understand that, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but we're also an industry that came out of like a bunch of hippies and stuff who care about the environment. And that's why I'm in this industry. And so I would hope that there would be more conversation about how can solar sort of better integrate into these building technologies, and how do we make efficiency part of the equation for people more of the time, to save them the energy in the first place rather than just cover it with solar.
Yeah, I remember my friend that wrote the community choice aggregation law. We used to sit around and have these long conversations. And he was saying, someday somebody could come up with like a super efficient light bulb. This was back in the day when we probably all had incandescents or like some compact fluorescence, like during that switch. And it's got a little chip in it. And you just knock on their door and you're like, I'm going to change your light bulbs and you get free light bulbs. But all the money that's saved from electricity, I get that electricity and you get free light bulbs. And if there was some way to calculate that, that would be like a, awesome deal. It's like, I remember hearing things about like light bulbs, switching light bulbs can save like 10 times or 20 times more than the light bulb costs, just all the energy that you save. And I guess we've kind of, most everybody's switched over to lots of LEDs by now anyway. But maybe that could be done with all kinds of energy efficiency where people don't have to go like insulate their houses and pay up front. They insulate their house and then it comes out of like some kind of savings for electricity, like they just do the calculation. Sort of like even how solar works sometimes when people they go out and they buy solar and all it means to them is their electric bill went down, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe they can install insulation and all it means to that person when they saw the installation, if they put it over like 20 years and savings and all that kind of stuff and double pane windows and all that, that all they notice is like, hey, my electric bill went down and I have these really cool windows. But if it's like you got to pay now and it's 20 years worth of savings and you got to pay today, a lot of people aren't going to do it. And then there's
Yeah.
also the question where like people want to move and all that kind of how that's going to work. So I think you should go out and figure all that out and make it happen because you're a community organizer, just like Obama. That was his claim to fame is he was a community organizer too. So
Yeah, that's right. Me and
mhm.
Obama. I'm just
Mhm.
like
Uh-huh.
him.
Yep.
Maybe I'll be president one day, Sean.
I think so. Yep. Uh-huh. I'm going to vote for you.
I better get my law degree sometime soon.
Uh-huh. I think that's a big problem is there's just too many lawyers and that are running the country. And I mean, every time I've had to deal with a lawyer, it's like, I don't even want to say what it feels like. I can't say that without getting in trouble. I'll just say that.
Yep, I
Uh-huh.
do agree. There's a lot of liability-minded people out there making decisions about everything.
Uh-huh. Yeah, just like lawyers and, Shakespeare had something to let's first thing kill all the lawyers is what he said. And then like if you get a whole bunch of lawyers, then they can just like kind of pretend they're working against each other, but they're all having a meeting. They're in the same organization and they're just trying to figure out how they can liberate us from our money.
Oh, do you think that's what the utilities are doing when they have meetings?
Well, yeah, they're a natural monopoly. And then they give all their money to all these lawyers that we're talking about, which are the politicians that are lawyers. And so the utilities give them all the money and they appoint people to the boards and they set the policy. And then that natural monopoly works out just right for them. And of course, the people that are making all the decisions for the utilities, even if the utility is losing money, how much does a CEO of a utility make when it loses money? Do they make more money or less money when it loses money? They just get a big salary. Shoot,
It seems problematic.
I better watch what I'm saying or something's going to happen. I'm a little bit worried for my safety now.
I mean, if there was one thing I wished more, well, there's probably a lot of things, but if there was a thing that I wished more homeowners and consumers would pay a little more attention to, it is sort of what's going on with energy policy, including their local utility and who's sitting on those boards and are they voting or not? And it makes a big difference, Some people in Durango, Colorado, maybe like 10 years ago in the sustainability sort of community organization, took it upon themselves to really organize well to get out the vote for a different board of directors. And it worked. A few years, they were able to really change the dynamic of what the conversation was at the utility and like get a lot more programs going around renewables and protect some of the stuff that was already in place. And so I think there are real success stories out there amongst some of the rural utilities, but also some of the urban ones. And I think it's concerning to me that a lot of things are, I think there's a lot of stuff in the next, 5 years that's going to happen around policy from the utility side that is possibly really bad for solar. So I hope that we can all get engaged.
Yeah, and you probably know about the net metering 3 thing, if it is net metering in California. And I mean, I guess for the utility, it's like, who do you blame? Because they're just doing their job. That's what their job is to do, is to make money. And if they're privately owned, they can get in trouble if they weren't doing all they could to make money, and there's shareholders and board meetings and all that kind of stuff. So we can't like blame them even. It's just like the system. And so the system is that there's the Public Utilities Commission, and they set the policy because they have to keep check on a natural monopoly, which is a utility, because you're not going to have like 5 sets of wires running down your street or something like that. And then who appoints the Public Utilities Commission? In California, with this thing, it was the governor, and we have like Governor Newsom. And you can see on like a lot of posts out there that there's a lot of people that are kind of mad at Newsom. And it's because he pointed that board. But then you have to also think about that. Like, would he have got elected if he didn't get the money from the utilities? And so it's that whole system. And I always think that like we need campaign finance reform, and that would fix everything if we could
Yeah.
figure out some way where people didn't have to go and raise money to get elected. Like, where do you find somebody that doesn't? Maybe they're a billionaire, but like you were kind of saying how you're going to run for president. So you better start kissing up to these utilities, because you need to get like $1 billion. Somebody's got to like just donate you $1 billion, and they're not going to give you $1 billion unless you make some kind of promise. I mean, it's like, that's what it's all for. It's like, you can see that there's a lot of these companies, they're donating to the winner and the loser of the same race sometimes, just so
Yeah.
they can have a say no matter who wins.
So many more important uses of that money for sure.
Yeah, so we just have to fix all that politics. So let's see some more things about your Solar for Women. Like, how can people get more involved, or where can they find Solar for Women, and how can we help promote you?
I do have a website at solarforwomen.com, so people can go there and read a little bit about, the story of how it got started and stuff. And I have a bunch of cool pictures of women out in the field doing solar install work that the folks I've met have allowed me to share with the world. And there's a few blog posts and stuff. It's not a site I'm managing super actively right now just because of time. When you're out in the field for 40 to 50 hours a week, it turns out it's a little bit hard to sort of run all these side things. But I do have a newsletter subscription thing on there that people can sign up for. And so as I build a bigger list of people there, I'll be able to do a little bit more to get the word out about things that are happening. And then I invite folks who know women who are in the field or want to reach out to me at Riley at solarforwomen.com. Or on the website, and I can connect the folks that are kind of already in the solar trades to the Facebook group if they're interested as well. They can look it up on Facebook and try to find it, on their own and ask to apply to be a member, but they can also just hit me up directly and I can connect them to it. And then lastly, just, women who want to share their stories more about their experience in the solar trades. I'm interested in starting to do a little bit more of that. So for anyone who feels excited about that, I would be interested to talk with them about it, because I think a lot of the people I know are a little more shy, so they're not as excited about being on video or posting on, all the social media accounts and stuff the way I am. So it's nice to figure out other ways to tell stories about other women if I can. And anyone out there who wants to help, to build Solar for Women in that community, and if they have skills in video editing or, those kinds of things, communications work, it would be helpful to me. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. And the hope is that I can find some time to do some development work at some point to raise money and do more with it as well.
Awesome. So, yeah, and I was just thinking too, of the people that work for me, a majority of them are women. And so I'll get them to sign up. Also, too, I know you're an installer, but is it anybody working in the solar industry that you're looking for, or?
No, because there's already women in solar. There's a lot of places women in solar, like broadly, can sign up and be a part of sort of groups of women. This is like very specifically for women in solar trades, because I think that was what I needed and what I couldn't find through any of those other groups, because most of the other groups tend to be heavy on the side of like salespeople and stuff. And it's not.
Okay, so like people that are out there installing, like the trades.
Installing, or maybe you're doing engineering and design work, or you used to be an installer and now you're a project manager, or something along those lines where you're a little bit more plugged into that kind of like construction. And
Okay, all right. I just had Jessica Harris. I just interviewed her recently too. Do you know who she is? She has an engineering firm and she has 23 engineers. She's grown like in the last couple of years from, I think, I'm not sure how long it took her to get from just her to 23, but
wow.
she's just like really good at growing her business and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
she's doing the engineering stuff
Awesome. Yeah, be
and
great to connect.
okay, so I'll introduce you to Jessica Harris, and you could listen to her when her podcast comes out. We have like a delay here.
Yeah.
So I think actually it's going to take about 2 months from the time we're, recording. And so, I don't want to get too political, but we might have a woman president by the time people are listening to this. So, yeah. And would you consider her in the solar industry, like if they're working in politics, like a woman vice president that's promoting renewable energy, something like that?
Like, should that person be in my group, you mean?
Yeah. Can we ask her to join?
Maybe that's what I'll do, is try to get Kamala directly in the group.
Yeah.
We do have Sarah Wilder, who is, an important player in the world of solar policy and used to be an installer.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. Awesome.
That's somebody you could totally interview, Sean.
All right. Well, you'll have to connect me.
Yeah.
And then I know there's Brittany Heller. Do you know? You must know her. Yeah.
I love Brit. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm going to talk to her on the podcast coming up. But I talk to her all the time because we work closely
Yeah.
at Heat Spring. Yep.
How are things going with the class?
Oh, the classes are going really good. And I'm always working on more classes and we're just about done. So by the time this comes out, we'll probably have the Spanish PVA class.
Ooh.
And that's been a lot of work putting that together with lots of different interpreters.
Yeah.
And it's just difficult right now in the industry because everybody is so busy to get people that are good at doing things to do stuff, and that's good. And that's just because we have this industry that's just growing like crazy, especially, you have to sometimes zoom out because year to year, you don't see it growing, especially if you're in a state that has something like net metering 3 slowing things down temporarily and stuff like that. But you zoom out and, just like there's this doubling rate and we hit 1 terawatt in the whole world a couple of years ago. And pretty soon we're going to have 2 terawatts in the whole world.
It's crazy how much it's grown so rapidly. Yeah. Sean, I have 2 questions for you.
Oh, great.
That are still about me, I guess.
I'm on Riley's podcast now.
Okay.
Hi, Riley.
Hey, thanks for joining. It's more like you put on your life coaching hat. So if I were to want to get into developing courses for women, what would your advice be, since you've done so much of that work already? And do you think it's worthwhile to develop new content, or do you think it's not because there's so much out there? First question. Second question is, you know me a little bit and you're following me on social media and things, but if you could see me doing something that you think I'd be well suited for in the next, 5 to 10 years, what do you think it would be?
Well, let's see. So for the first question is like about the training and all that kind of stuff. And so I'd love to work with you on something. We could work together, put out a class, do some videos, or, actually I'd love to have you be part of my class. In fact, when we were hanging out at the ASES conference in Albuquerque, I was even asking you about helping me with my class. So I still am interested in that if you want to do something like that. And you're actually like a lot more experienced than you were at that time. So
Yeah.
that would be a really cool thing. And then so it's so hard to tell a future. Like, where would you be? What was it at 10 years? Is that what you're saying? Like in 10 years?
5 or 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 10 years. And so the solar industry will be so much bigger. And you're going to be like having lots of people that are probably working underneath you and charging. And it could be anywhere because it's like, I have no idea where I'm going to be in 5 or 10 years either. So how about like we're working together on something and we're just doing great. That would be a good thing. Hopefully, yeah, that'd be great if we work together and then like teaching different classes and all that kind of stuff. And I know that because you have a full-time job right now, so maybe you can't do some of that stuff, but it could be like, on the weekends or something. There's always ways to do that. And if you wanted to help me update some of my classes and things like that, I'd love to have that kind of help. I think there's just plenty of opportunity. It just depends on where you want to put your focus. One of the things that's kind of hard too is you put your focus on your job because you're responsible and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of hard to go off and do something else. And so how do you make it evolve? And you just got to make it happen. And sometimes you have to work extra hard during a transition, something like that, and take chances too. That's one of the things is I worked for my full-time job that in 2008 was for Fidelity Roof Company. That's when I went full-time into solar and I started teaching. And then I got somebody saying, yeah, come out to Pennsylvania and teach classes once a month. And it's like, well, am I going to quit my job? How am I going to work that? I was taking a big chance. I could have lost my other job and that job might have just lasted 1 week, and I guess I'm the kind of person that likes to take a chance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's helpful. It's helpful to hear how you got started yourself too.
and I've always been more of an entrepreneur. And most people are the type of people that like having a paycheck and health insurance and all that kind of stuff and getting off at 5 o'clock. And it's after 5 o'clock right now. So,
Right. Here we are.
and, and everybody else in the house is finishing dinner and I've been going since 5 in the morning. So,
Yes, you are a hard worker, Sean, filling up your days very full.
yeah. But also, too, I think that we love what we do and it just feels good and it's like the right thing and it's the green thing. I was listening to this guy that I've actually played guitar with who's now the chancellor of UC Berkeley now. And he's a really good guitar player. And I remember that he gave a speech at camp. His name's Rich Lyons. And at that time, he was in the dean of the Haas Business School at Berkeley, a really cool guy. And he said something like, this is the first time in history, and I'm sure I'm paraphrasing it way off because it's been like 15 years since I heard this talk. This is the first time in history where doing the thing that's like the right thing is also doing the thing that makes you the most money or something. It's like we're seeing like all these renewable energy companies are taking off and our jobs are taking off. And before, if you go back 100 years, it would be like you're doing like the coal industry or something to make the most money. You're doing things or they're like, killing people and making weapons and all that kind of stuff. And now it's turning out to be like doing the right thing is doing the thing that makes you the most money. So it's the green thing makes you the green.
Excellent. That would be helpful as I become, an older person.
Yeah, I guess there is sort of like a lifespan of being on the roof, which also has the best views, by the way.
Oh, the temperature is sometimes brutal, but it's also sometimes breezy and really nice up there. The views are always the best.
Yeah, probably like the springtime, the fall time. Those are good times to be up there on the roof. Yeah.
Yeah, I do enjoy it.
But then sometimes being in Colorado, I guess sometimes you're probably like shoveling snow off the roof.
Yeah, Boulder's been okay, but yeah, there's been a fair amount of shoveling and then waiting for that last layer of ice to melt off before you can do the rest of your job.
Yeah, and then you get the times that are too hot and all that kind of stuff. But,
Yeah,
at least for the cold times, I know when I lived in Alaska, they just said it's never too cold. You just have the wrong clothes.
right. I think the Minnesota people say that too.
Yeah, probably the Siberians and the
Yeah, yeah.
Mongolians. I remember I went to Mongolia in the winter solstice and it was like 40 below. And I show up with this big old Carhartt jacket. And the guy's like, that's not going to do it. And he takes me over to the store
Like
and,
it's not enough.
gets me a jacket to put over that jacket.
That sounds, yeah, really cold. Like it would be rough there for any amount of time.
Well, let's see. Is there anything else that you want to talk about or finish off with?
I don't think so. I feel grateful for the opportunity to share some of my, opinions about the size of modules
Yeah.
and solar policy that I maybe wasn't expecting to share,
Mhm.
and talk about solar for women and
Right.
yeah, my experience a little bit. So I guess mostly what I usually leave people with is if you're excited about solar and you want to learn a trade and you think that might be for you, then you should definitely give it a try. And if you're a woman who's interested in it, reach out to me and ask me questions. And there's a growing number of us who are in the field and can talk about that. And we need a lot more electricians in the world. We need a lot more solar installers because the industry keeps growing. And it's a very empowering trade to be in, because not only are you learning to do a skill, you're getting to work in a team collaboratively, and you're also, getting to have an adventure, and you're addressing climate change all at the same time. Like, what's to not like about that?
That's a no-brainer. So if there are anybody that's listening that knows somebody that can be helped, and by going to Solar for Women, so that's Solar FOR, not the number, right? And go to solarforwomen.com, and you can get a hold of Riley, and she can help coach you to get into the solar industry. And it could be done. There's a lot of women out there, and Riley will hook you up with all of them.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. You can find out more by going to Solar, SEAN, that's solarshawn.com. You can check out some of my online classes at HeatSpring, like Riley did. I think that's where we first came into contact. And now she is NABCEP certified. She has the PV Installation Professional, which is the gold standard NABCEP certification. And I remember she was a lot of fun to have in class and also fun to hang out with. And thanks for being on the show, Riley.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. Have a good one.